All right.
Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Street Fighter Universe documentary. I'm delighted to be joined by the Dobson brothers here this evening, Paul Dobson and Michael Dobson, both who have played prominent roles in the Street Fighter animated series between 1995 to 1997. Lads, great to have you.
Thanks for having us. Indeed.
And I suppose I was just looking through here, and Paul and Michael, you played so many roles in terms of that voiceover thing that through this documentary we are sort of trying to associate a character of the Street Fighter to each person. So, Paul, we've do the honour of inviting you as Honda, and
there we go.
I suppose Michael, we'll put you down as Cody.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
No problem. Lads, to start off, I suppose Street Fighter back in 1995, were you one of the when you were growing up? I suppose, did you play the arcade games? I mentioned I was speaking to TJ Storm the other day, another prominent voiceover actor, and he was telling me.
Great interview, by the way. I saw that.
Yeah, he did a sort of voiceover role. He did Birdie in Street Fighter V. And he was telling me back in the early 90s that he would go to the arcade scene in Las Vegas. And he used to be playing the slot machines in terms of Street Fighter. And wonders to behold, he was actually playing this guy and he was all dressed in costume. And back before he became famous, there was actually Leonardo DiCaprio he was up against in Street Fighter in an arcade center in the middle of the town. And yeah, he beat him.
Awesome.
Said Leonardo DiCaprio beat him out the gate. Apparently, anyway, as his character. Have you any memories of growing up playing Street Fighter in arcades, or what was your first earliest memories of the franchise, or were you anyway involved in it before you got the voiceover gigs?
I remember seeing friends of mine play it in the arcade, and then I'd have a go here and there and stuff. And then when the personal gaming consoles came out with I'm pretty sure it was Nintendo that I had the Nintendo console, and so was able to start playing it at home and filling up the basement with friends and sitting back and having battles and just going head to head. And, oh yeah.
How about yourself, Michael?
Moves.
Well, me, when I started taking martial arts when I was 12 years old, and back then the person that was talking about mixed martial arts, so the grandfather, if you will, of that, it would be Bruce Lee, who was mixing styles together and everything. So I was an avid martial artist. So going into the arcades and playing that game was just awesome because I got to be a superstar in the thing. But it was so much fun to play that, and yeah, a lot of great memories of spending a lot of money in the arcades and coming back with really raw hands. And getting my butt kicked. I got whipped in the game too.
And I suppose
transferred over to being used as a practice dummy for his martial arts.
Well, you have to practice.
And I suppose, lads, the two big iconic games at the time, the two fighting games, and the big rivals back then, still rivals there today, was Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. They were the two sort of iconic fighting games. They've stood the test of time. They're still around here today and still sort of going strong. And they were sort of the big traditional powerhouses in fighting game. If you fought, you either knew one or the other, and you either sort of played one or both, or you just always want to have a copy of one or the other. And what is it that some games like that you just, I suppose, maternal in their essence, that they're like James Bond, they just seem to go on and roll on through the decades and the decades?
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Well, are you saying which games stay with us?
Why do you think Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, 30 years on, new copies are coming out again and again, and all the storylines, new stories, the characters are getting reinvigorated time after time, and there's more demand. It seems new every generation that's born, they just want more and more and more each time.
Well, I think I mean, for one, just technology as a whole has gained such a foothold in all of this that it's getting better and better and better. And so, I mean, if you have a chance to play these games again and have the graphics that they can do now. And if you put them side by side, I mean, wow.
But that was the whole emergence of the video game industry merging with the motion picture industry. And so, I mean, that was a really iconic time too, where we were actually able to go to the theater and see these characters come up from the video game and come to life on the screen. I mean, there can't be anything more iconic than that. I mean, that was the whole introduction to what we, now know is the normal. You look at, what other companies like Marvel and DC have done with their franchise and how that's parlayed itself into games as well as motion pictures. I mean, it's kind of like seeing Star Wars for the first time. It's mind blowing, right? Our minds were blown that we got to participate with these characters in that sort of virtual way back then. I mean, it was all new stuff.
And not to mention, I mean, if you get to play things like that again at our age, it gives you the whole injection of youth again.
But it's fun because you can look at your kids and go, look, because they'll come on because the consoles back then, I mean, they were hard with the whole sort of, with the thumb twirl and everything, and try and get the special moves and everything. Like, you watch kids now and they get frustrated trying to play this. You're like, how the hell did you play those games like that? But it was like 50 million different ways of doing stuff on a really small console. It was just, we paid our dues, man, back then. It hurts to be a gamer.
I suppose, lads, one thing that really struck, you mentioned that transition from gaming to the big screen, and where Capcom tried once back in the 90s with Street Fighter, the actual movie, it didn't have the same reception as its compatriot Mortal Kombat had in terms of the movies. The original Mortal Kombat, in terms of martial arts, in terms of the fighting game, is probably one of the renowned sort of movies of its time with Robin Shaw and all the sort of fighting scenes. While I suppose the Street Fighter movie, it spent so much of its money trying to get Jean-Claude Van Damme and trying to get the great Raul Giuliani that it sort of almost, they sort of rushed the sort of product. And while Mortal Kombat obviously went on and it had another movie, and then it had a TV series called Mortal Kombat Conquest and Mortal Kombat Legacy as well, another sort of TV series. Street Fighter, it sort of had the movie and obviously didn't really go that sort of route. I know ye got in that animated sort of series, which is very popular, but was it due to the Capcom were sort of frightened after the first sort of reaction to invest again probably in the franchise in terms of it? Do you think?
I think there's I'm sure they wanted greater success for the movie than what they received, unfortunate but true. But that would maybe give anyone a little bit of cold feet.
Plus, again, back then it was all new ground too. How do you present something like that to the audience? They were breaking new ground, doing what they were doing, trying to bring these characters to life. Going from a video game, transitioning to making them, real people with real histories and real backgrounds and things like that. I mean, that's huge high risk, no matter what you do. But especially back then, to get the audience to buy into what into these characters and accept them. And I think what you said certainly holds true, is that a lot of the budget went to the stars, and and you kind of sort of see that a bit. They were kind of limited with what they had to do with some of the sets, and some of the props were kind of like, but I mean, good for them for coming out and doing what they do. I mean, it is wonderful that people are still talking about that movie to this day. I mean, that's a testament.
And another little piece of trivia for you: we actually worked on the motion picture.
Oh, did you?
Behind the scenes, we did what's called WALA, which is an acronym for With All Actors. So all the fight scenes, people falling and getting all the hit reactions,
background voices.
So we did all the background voices on the movie, which was done at.
What were the creatures, or what was that thing?
That's right. We were.
And we had
all the experiments.
We got picked on for doing all the.
Paul and I ended up being the guys thrashing our voice with.
And I suppose Kylie Minogue was walking away saying, "What are those two guys doing in the background?"
It was fun though, man. I mean, we got to see the movie before it came to the theaters, so that was pretty awesome. That was very, very cool. Yeah, and to work with those people.
Yeah, and I suppose, guys, in terms of that, the animated series back in 1995, 2 seasons between 1995 to 97. And one thing that strikes me being a voiceover actor is that you're not particularly tied to any sort of character in terms of your face, in terms of if you act as a character, say like Robin Shaw, you're Liu Kang. That's sort of, unless you change your looks fairly dramatically, in terms of a new Mortal Kombat movie, you can obviously be another sort of character. But in a voiceover character, you can play, say, in a video game or animation series, you could be one character for one episode, then another character for another episode, or in a video game, you can be a different sort of character. So it opens up so many opportunities going down the road if there's a continued cycle in terms of its success.
we missed the very beginning thing of that.
Paul got a phone call that came through and it muted you
were completely
audio.
muted. I was in a panic. I'm trying to figure out the
no,
guys,
going, no problem. I repeat what I'm saying. Just in terms of being a voiceover actor, in terms of the Street Fighter, you're as being voiceover characters, you're not really associated to one particular character like a movie star, an action star would be seen, because their face is associated to that person. So if a new move, they would have to change dramatically. It'd be like Robin Shaw trying to play let's say Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat. It just wouldn't work because people will know him as Liu Kang. But being a voiceover actor, you can play voice one character in one episode, a different character in another episode, maybe a different character again in a sort of video game. So that gives great continuity going forward if a project is successful. That's
true. It's funny though, because we've learned in the voiceover world too, the fans are very, very loyal. And sometimes when they switch actors for with a make, sometimes there can be a lot of kickback.
I tell you, there's an uprising, Jim. They come right after you.
That's how you can come back and sweep you away. It's like sometimes fans can get pretty upset about stuff like that in the voiceover world too. But I completely understand what you're saying. Visually, you can't make transitions like that. With what we do, yes, we can, but they can still be kickback from the fan base for sure, in situations like that. As for sometimes studios want to take different directions with a character for whatever reason, maybe to open up a new storyline, and so they want the character to be played a little bit differently. So they might get somebody else to play the character. But it
still hurts when they do stuff like that, Jim. It hurts. I don't like it.
It's not good.
Been doing this for years. It still doesn't hurt any less.
Yeah.
And guys, how did the opportunity come about for you to get involved in the animated series in Street Fighter? Was it something your agent came about you and said, listen, the Street Fighter, you were in the background for Street Fighter, there's a new animated show coming up, would you like to try and voice for different character? Or did you know what characters you were going to read for when you came in, or were you just given, here's A, B, C, D, give a voice for this, give a voice for that, and the producers in, oh, I like this voice, you're going to be him? Or what's the scenario there? Or did you have a particular character in mind before you actually went in to try out for him?
Well, when the shows come in, I mean, they'll go to the agency first, and then they get the breakdown of the show. Come in, and they'll get the breakdown for the show, and then they just basically will send out the auditions to us, the actors, and then we get to choose. For the most part, back in the day, we would get to choose who we wanted to read for and such like that. It's a little more specialized now. They're just with everything.
You make your selects where you feel that what your strengths are and what characters are probably more suited to what our skill set is. So
excuse me, just for 1 second.
So I mean, and obviously there's that thrill too when characters come through and you go, oh, I want to be this character, right? Or I want to be this character. And you're hoping that they'll see it that way too, but it doesn't always go that way. But a lot of times when you are really passionate about a particular character, casting directors, they'll identify with that sometimes, and they'll think, oh, well, this person's all over it, and they'll feel confident having you in the studio because they know that you'll be able to bring all those additional nuances to the character to give it more depth and make it more believable. because they can tell that you really relate to that character in certain respects.
Yeah, and I was speaking to another voiceover actor in terms of Mortal Kombat project, David Lodge. He voices Cabal in Mortal Kombat X, and he told me that in terms of when he goes in for a voiceover, he likes to see an animated drawing or a past sort of video animation clip of what the character sort of looked like, or how he walked, or how the way he sort of presented himself, to give an idea so he could formulate a picture in his mind in terms of what he thinks he might look like. And he was saying to me, if he was tall in height and he had big broad shoulders, then they'd put on a more sort of muscular, deep sort of tone. And then if he was sort of small and sharp and so on, is that the same? Do you have to see those? And do you like to see those animated drawings? Do you like to see those visual effects? Does it make your job easier?
Help. Definitely helps.
It's a huge help.
You don't get it all the time, but it definitely helps.
Sadly, with the market being so competitive now, a lot of times, there's non-disclosure agreements that we have to sign, and even after all that, some producers don't want to release any of the material, for example, like what the character looks like and things like that, until we actually get to the studio and see it. So sometimes you can have an idea in your head about this character, and you get to the studio
Completely different,
and you go, oh, they're only 3 feet tall and 400 pounds. That's going to change my audition a lot. Yeah, because all those things, right? If they're fit, they're going to have that sense about them. If they're not so fit, if they look more lethargic, if they're older, younger. That's the other thing too. Is like,
I forgot to tell you, he's 127 years old.
Yeah, we completely agree with him. The more information, the better, and especially the visual, character depiction. That's huge for us.
And I suppose, Paul, I know it's a long time ago now, but in terms of the character Honda, a big sort of sumo sort of wrestler type guy. So in terms of that sort of character, in terms of that sort of an accent as such, when you're reading for that and you see the role Honda, and then all of a sudden you see this big sort of sumo wrestler, does it almost think you all right, there's no real time. Did you have that in advance? Because I imagine a sumo wrestler, a Chinese sort of Japanese sort of tone, that must be very hard as a voiceover actor to just maybe within a day, or maybe as Michael said, coming in and just seeing it there and then to be able to nail that, I imagine.
Well, I thought to myself, I saw the character and just came up with the idea that, thinking about the uniform, basically, like what sumo wrestlers have to wear, it looks pretty tight. So I thought, getting into the ring,
I don't think
I thought that maybe he would, be up there. It's a little tight, I'm talking about, Jim.
No, obviously.
Jim. I'm sorry you had to see that, people.
So
just do a wipe right there.
Just wanted, because the sheer girth when you was you want to bring down and make it a big voice sort of thing, but then start maybe throwing in, hopefully staying away from stereotypes of the accents and stuff like that. You don't want to be crossing those boundaries either. So yeah, it's always going to make a difference on how you present the voice as to, like sizes and all these kinds of things, regardless of the tightness of the underwear that they're wearing when they enter the ring.
We were in a really I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And Michael, in terms, continue. And maybe you can. I was going to ask you the same thing about the Cody character, but finish off what you were going to say there first.
We were very fortunate back in those days here in Vancouver. We were we were new territory in the animation world for directors. For example, Sue Blue directed the series, and so we were a very new talent pool. We had only been around for a few years, and there weren't a lot of people in Vancouver at the time that were doing voiceover for animation. So we had the luxury back then of not a lot of competition. I mean just in numbers. No, we had Scott McNeil and people like that who were just like legends, and Gary Chalk and Michael Donovan and Ian Corlett and
Richard Newman,
Kathleen Barr, Tabitha St. Germain. Those people. they were the people that because of their talent that the industry's sort of flashed and sparked here in Vancouver, and I think this project started coming to us. But Paul and I came a little after that when they first started. But what I was just basically saying was that we were really fortunate because there wasn't a huge amount of people, and so we got to play a lot of multiple characters when we went on those shows, which was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
I like to think that it was just the talent that was speaking. This is part where we might.
That's true. If we sucked, if we had sucked, I don't think anything would have come up to Vancouver. No, it would be pretty barren up here. But we're fortunate. Yeah, it worked out well for us. But sorry, what's the part of the question, Jim?
And you have to
in terms of your Cody character there, I mentioned Paul about Honda. What was similar like for you and Michael in terms of Cody? In terms of when you saw the drawing, did you see any drawings or anything like that, what was your initial reaction to it? Or
well, I know he really is a brawler, right? And his skill was knives, and so just looking at him and the attitude, like the pose, for example, that I was shown when I first saw him, he had a really sort of like in your face dude kind of stance, and I could tell that this was a guy that really didn't like pull punches. Like he was brash. He came in, hard and fast. He might have been a little bit sort of loud. Some people might even say maybe a little bit of a thuggish side to him. But those keynotes for me, when I first saw that, I thought, well, this guy's kind of sort of a mix of like maybe a Stallone character mixed with, some guy like, the cigar smoking. So it's kind of like the Sergeant Savage I played on G.I. Joe, that kind of sort of like go in there and just, Mr. No Fear just loves fighting, right? This is what this guy's all about. And so I think a lot for me was attitude with that guy. The voice, yes, but it was that attitude where you could tell that, this might be a guy that you might want to sort of just leave alone because he's not going to back down from a fight.
If you had a choice of playing a character on the show, who would you have wanted to play?
Yeah, who would you play, Jim?
Me, I suppose Vega was the guy who sort of had all the sort of glamour and sort of style to him, I suppose, in terms of that Mexican sort of rodeo, sort of Spanish sort of tranqueta. Yeah. I suppose he was probably the one that probably, I suppose, eked that sort of bit of royalty, but had that sort of bravado about him as well.
I think I was trying to channel Antonio Banderas when I got to play him on the animated series.
Guys, in terms of now, we're looking at the 21st century, and we've a new Mortal Kombat movie coming out in early spring next year. I know Louis Tan, for example, and there's a whole load of really renowned Japanese actresses and actors going to be in that sort of movie. But in terms of Street Fighter, going forward now, I suppose in the 90s, I suppose what you could do in terms of TV, I suppose in terms of a PG sort of audience, more family audience. But now in the last few years, we've seen with the release of The Dark Knight, with the release of The Joker, on the TV industry, the film industry, it's got more sort of darker movies are more acceptable now, more R-rated sort of movies. So would you think like that? Well, I know Mortal Kombat is coming out and it's going down that sort of routes because that's what the diehard fan base want. But you think for Street Fighter, the original movie, maybe people thought it was campy in sort of nature, but do you think there's 20 years on, do you think there'll be a real demand for it now, given that what's acceptable now and what you can do now in terms of movies, in terms of that more adult audience? Do you think now is the right time for maybe a release of a Street Fighter movie or a TV series on Netflix or something? Do you think there is a real sort of audience and demand for it today?
I think that it would actually transfer very well to like things that people but you could take it a number of different ways. I mean, there could be like a lighter version of that, and I'm sure that would be well accepted.
But you know what comes to mind for me for a storyline, like when I think about movie franchises really doing well right now, is if you look at the Expendables, right? With that team of people, and they all have their own special skill set. I think if you could find the right storyline to place those characters in, I think those the characters themselves would fare the test of time from back then to now.
I think I would liken Street Fighter more to like show like Warrior, like what Brett has put together. Brett Chan, he's
Bruce Lee's story
the
of the
fight
Warrior.
coordinating, the stunt coordination on that, and the second unit directing. And
But that's what I mean, though. If
like,
you get the right story, right, you can put those characters in. I think it would
but as
work.
far as it being received and such, I think, you could make it grittier and a little more sort of hardcore in.
Well, I think it's got that
stuff.
sci-fi element to it too, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a lot of great elements, and especially with CGI the way it is now, it's so seamless to integrate it with live action. I think that somebody with a really good imagination taking those characters with the technology they have now, you could have a really kick-ass film. I think that it's worth exploring.
A Netflix series.
I wish somebody would do it. Maybe that too. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Paul, Michael, on that note, pleasure talking to you today, lads. Paul Dobson, I suppose to call out all the characters you voiced in Street Fighter, I suppose the interview will go on for the next 15 minutes. So we're associating with you with Honda. Michael, in terms of Cody, and I know you played Colonel Sawada as well in terms of Street Fighter animated series. Lads, a pleasure talking to you this evening. A bundle of laughs, really enjoyable conversation. Wish you all your best in your future endeavors, and no doubt more cameo roles to appear for ye in Street Fighter in the near future. Cheers, lads. Great conversation and great talking to you.
And you too, man. Good chatting, Jim, and thanks for dropping by.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And all the best to you and everyone in Ireland too. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Cheers, Michael. Cheers, Paul.
Good luck through the lockdown.